Hello. In this video I'm going to work through the processing of two images to produce focus stacked images of these two botanical scenes. This is one of them and this is the other. This is associated with a thread at dpreview.com where we're discussing these things, and these particular examples have been produced by Maggie Mole, who's a user in the forums, and she is currently doing an exercise where, and she's just getting into focus stacking at the moment, an exercise where she's trying different approaches to doing the stacking in this particular post in a different thread. She tried using Zareen Stacker, Helicon Focus and Photoshop, and this is one of the stacks that we're going to look at in this video, but we're going to start with this one. Now, this was captured as a video. Very often the images for focus stacking are captured as RAW or JPEG images with the focus plane moved from front to back or back to front, either by the camera or by the user. So this workthrough is in some ways specific to using video and also to using Helicon Focus, which is what I use. But hopefully there will be enough general information here for it to be of interest or use to other people. Now, if we look at the source file for this, it's a video, it's a 4K video, and if we look at its details, it was captured with a 30mm macro lens on a Panasonic Micro Four Thirds camera. It was captured using f3.5, which is the maximum aperture for that particular lens. It was using ISO 200, which is base ISO for that camera, and it was captured at 1/1600th of a second. Now, often videos, normal videos, are captured at a 24th, a 30th, 60th of a second in order to give a smooth rendition. With this technique you can use shutter speeds, ISO and F numbers as normal, just as long as the shutter speed is a 30th of a second or faster. So in this case Maggie was able to use a nice fast shutter speed. She also captured this, I'm pretty sure, handheld, and some people don't think handheld is such a good idea for capturing stuff for focus stacking. Maggie's trying to do it, and it's the way I work the whole time, but a lot of people prefer to use a tripod to keep the camera steady. So if the first thing we've got to do is to turn this video into a collection of images, and they're going to be JPEG images. Can't get RAW out of this. And then we're going to have to align the images. So if I look at Helicon Focus, what I'm going to do is to drag this video into Helicon Focus, and what it's done is extracted 45 JPEGs from it, which means that the video took 1.5 seconds to capture at 30 frames a second, and it's aligned them so that we can go through and look at the individual images backwards and forwards. So the next thing we need to do is to select which of those images we want to use. Now I'm currently at the first of the images. Now what the camera does is it starts with the focus plane but somewhere between the front and the back, and it then moves the focus forward. So if I just go through a few frames, see, it suddenly goes out of focus. Now that means it's reached as near as it's going to get to the camera. It's run out of things to focus from. So I don't want, I've gone back to the beginning now, I don't want that one or that one, but as soon as it jumps, I'll take the rest at that point. So I'm going to delete the first 4 of those. If I can, oh, that's better. So if I delete those. Now the question is, what's the last one that I want to use? Well, I'm going to run through, frame at a time, and we can see that grass is really in focus now, and now at the end it jumped again. So if we go back, so I'm halfway through now, and the grass is getting more and more in focus, the flowers are going more and more out of focus, then quite suddenly it's jumped back to the middle again to where it started. So I don't want these ones at the end either, so I'll delete those. So I've now got a set of images which are running. I then went from the front, from the back to the front, and now I can go from the front through to the back. In fact, just looking at them, I've probably not taken quite enough out at the end there, because the grass would be sharpest, so I'll take these out as well. Now, I could use all those, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can get the background here, which is pretty cluttered with this grass. I'm going to see if I can soften that up a bit. Now, this is pretty difficult because those crocuses, the flowers, are actually quite small and pretty close to the ground, so there isn't much distance between the flowers and the grass, which is going to make it difficult to get the grass out of focus. However, Maggie has used the maximum aperture available to her, so she's got the best chance of doing this, better than she would if she been using a smaller aperture. So I've gone back to the beginning. I'm running through, and what I'm doing is looking at the flowers. That one's gone into focus, that one's still out of focus, that one I think is just starting to come into focus. So I'm going to look at this one now, and yeah, that was in focus, now it's gone. This one's in focus, so this is the rearmost of the flowers. So I'm going to keep going until now that time the tip of that went out of focus. So I'm going to carry on. And actually I'm going backwards and forwards a bit now, backwards and forwards, and I think that'll do. So I'm going to get rid of all the ones after this, because as much as I want of the flowers are in focus now, and that's about the maximum that I can get the grass out of focus, so I'll delete those. And so the grass is a bit less obtrusive than it was before when it was sharper. The next thing is to stack these images. Pelican Focus has 3 methods. This method A is an averaging method, and it produces rather soft images by and large. I only use that in rather special cases, which we could talk about some other time, and I use method B, this depth map, or C, which is pyramid. Now, these produce different sorts of results, and they've got different sorts of problems. And I'm going to do what I often do, which is to produce a stack using each of these 2 methods and see how they come out. Now, if we set this back to the defaults, you can see that this method has 2 parameters called radius and smoothing. What I typically do with this method B is to move the radius up about halfway or so and leave the smoothing where it is. One could play with this. I'm just not methodical enough to have put deep effort into finding out exactly what the best one is, and I don't do it on an image by image basis. This seems to work well enough for what I do, and so this is what I use. So I'm going to now render this using method B, and we've currently got 18 images here. So it's now rendered it. Now bear in mind that I'm using a rather powerful PC here, which has got a pretty powerful graphics chip, a graphics card in it, because I use it for playing games, and so it has got a fairly up-to-date and heavyweight graphics card in it. On a lot of computers things won't happen nearly as fast as this. Anyway, it's produced that version of it here, method B, with parameters 30 and 4, 30 for radius, 4 for smoothing. And before I even look at that, I'm going to go to method C. This only has one parameter, and I'm going to leave it where it is. So I'll now do the rendering with method C, and that's done that. Now, if we have a look at these, yeah, I've not done something that I meant to, but never mind. If we have a look at these are actually, in this case, they're fairly similar. In fact, what I'll do is, I did say this was unscripted. I'm going to go back and load this in again and go to the beginning and delete the first few, and then go to the end and delete the ones at the end. There we go, that's about the end. Delete those. So that's all the ones running from front to back. There are now 30 of them rather than the 18 I think it was that I used before. So this goes back to where if we start at the beginning, and the focus plane is now going through the flowers and back to the grass. There we go. So if I now render that one using method B, and I'll render it using method C, we can see that method C is a mess. Now that may be because I haven't quite deleted enough at the end. Let's take another 3 out and try and render it again. Now, one of the things that this is illustrating, it's still looking rather rough there. If we try method B on that, it's looking better. This illustrates a couple of things. One is that with suitable software, you can take a somewhat experimental approach. You can try things and see what works, because I've been doing this for a while now, and I still find it pretty unpredictable as to what's going to work and what isn't. I know in some cases, I look at something and think, well, that's not likely to work. Don't think I'll bother. Although that can be a mistake sometimes. But a lot of the time, like with this, I had no idea that was going to come out looking like that. So the business about which of the images you choose at the far side, at the back of the scene, there are two aspects of it. One of them is not very clear in this case, and that has to do with the difference between the way the background looks. It can be more or less out of focus. Now we'll see an example later with the other example where there's a much bigger difference between what the background looks like, depending on where we stop using the images for the stack. What was the other thing to do with choosing the... Oh yes, the other thing is, of course, where you choose to stop at the end may, if you use too many, you may run into problems. And we'll see that again to a lesser extent with the other example. So, two reasons. At the front end, with the videos at least, you get rid of the ones that where the camera is just moving to the nearest thing it can focus. You remove the ones at the back end where it's moving, where it's finished and it's moving back to the middle, and you then may have to remove some more in order to get an image which doesn't look horrible. At that point, you can decide to take it back further for aesthetic reasons, so that you get a picture that you like the look of better. Sometimes it may be that you can't get a picture that looks like you'd like it to use because because you need to take the back so far back that it runs into problems like this one. So we've now got these two versions. They're very similar to one another, and we can look closer at them and examine them in detail. Now it may be that one of these is sharper than the other in a particular place, and it may be that one of them has, for example, halos around the edge more than the other one does. Let's just suppose, for the sake of argument, and I don't think it's hardly true in this case, but let's just suppose the method C tends to produce sharper images. However, it has a tendency to produce halos around the edge, especially where the image is dark. And if you raise the shadows, that can be particularly evident. Now, I'm not seeing much of that here. That's a natural shadow there. But I think there may be, we have to look incredibly, this is 300%, so I mean, who cares? But there is actually a halo there. Sometimes with method C, they are clearly visible at normal viewing size. So one of the things, and whereas with method B it might not be. So one of the things you can do is use two stacks which use different methods or different parameters. Now this doesn't always work, and I don't know if it's going to work this time, but let's just suppose that method C here was sharper here, but method B was better around the outsides. So what I could do is start with method B and say I want to do retouching, and I want to retouch from one of the others. Now I'm going to retouch from this method C, which is the one with the sharper inside here. Now I can simply paint. On the left here we've got the method C version, and on the right we've got the method B version. So if I just paint here, I've now, and in this case it's a silly thing to do because there's virtually no difference anyway, but had the method C been a lot sharper than that one, I'd now have a sharper version on the inside, but I wouldn't have the halos around the edge that I might have with method C over there. And there are some parameters here to do with the brush which can help with getting the brushing to working, but that's more complicated than I want to go into at this stage. But there is a fair degree of flexibility there that can, in some circumstances, help a lot. So at that point, you can save the image. In fact, what I'll do is this is the version that I'm going to save. So I'll say save, and I'm going to put it into where are we? I'm going to put it into here. I'm going to save it as a TIFF file for reasons I'll explain in just a moment. So what I often do, this doesn't matter particularly, but I tend to shorten the name because these names can get very long because of other things I do to them. So if I save that as a TIFF file, I might then go into Lightroom and crop, but in this case I'm not going to bother because the composition looks balanced to me, and that's, you know, I'm content with that. But what I will do is something that I do quite often now. This is here, that's this one, and I'll go into Denoise AI, Topaz Denoise AI, and drag the TIFF file into there and run auto on it for noise reduction and sharpening, but it's usually too sharp, so I'll halve the amount of sharpening it's being given, and then I'll save that one, and I'll save it as a JPEG. There we go. I'll save it with called auto half sharp on the end of the name, and I'll save it into this test folder that I've got. Nope, yeah, that'll do. Right, save it into there. So what we've got is a version that's stacked and then given a bit of sharpening and noise reduction afterwards. That's very much an optional last step. You can go straight from Helicon Focus out to JPEG, and that's what a lot of people would want to do. So that's the first example. The second example is this Mahonia. Now, this is one where Maggie's had a go at it. And if we look at Maggie's version, something she's pointed out is that if we look, oh, here we go, let's look at this version here. If we look down here, we can see that something's gone wrong. I'm not sure I can point at it, but here we can see the yellow flowers through one of these very dark leaves. And if we look around, we could find some other things as well. We can see some around, looking at the top of the yellow flowers here, we can see halos. They're around here, whoops, here and here. Notice also the background, because I'm going to switch in a moment to the version that I did of this, and I didn't do it with reference to Maggie's. I hadn't looked at Maggie's at the time I did mine. I just did it in the way that I normally do mine. So I'm going to switch now to my version. Now, look at the background. I'll go back to Maggie's. And if we have a look here, and have a look here, and here, have a look at those things in my version. They're out of focus. And that's because the last of the images that I used was much nearer to the camera than the last of the images that Maggie used. And one of the things you can do with stacking, sometimes, it depends on the scene, is to play with which of the last images that you use, and you can make things look, as you can see in this case, rather different overall, different sort of image. There are some other things going on as well, and I'll tell you about those in a moment. So in terms of stacking it, if we go to the source video, we simply, as before, drag the source video into here. Helicon Focus extracts JPEGs and aligns them, so they're now aligned. Now, have I put the wrong thing in here? Why is it? Oh yes, okay, so we start at the beginning. And by the way, for people using Helicon Focus or going to use Helicon Focus, at the moment these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc., and they always are. In both the cases I've looked at, number 1 has been at the front. Sometimes, for reasons I don't understand, the one at the front is actually the last of them. And you have to work backwards in order to work backwards through the scene. Here I can work forwards through the images to work backwards through the scene. So I need to look at the ones I'm going to run through from the front, and there it's gone out of focus. And I could carry on until the first thing comes into, oh, there we go. Now, did you see? Hold on, let me start again. So it's in focus, the focus is coming forward, it's gone out of focus. Now what's happening now is that I think this bit here at the bottom left hand corner is nearest to the camera. I think we may see that come more into focus. There it is. It suddenly jumped into focus. And now I'm going to keep going, and yeah, the flowers are coming more into focus. They didn't jump though. Whenever there's one of these sudden jumps, you probably want to delete everything on one side of the jump, otherwise you'll probably have problems. So I'm going to, that looks all right from that point, so let me do this again, and I go backwards and forwards, trying to choose there. That jumped, and then it's stabilized. So as soon as it's stabilized, and that's in focus over there, I'm happy to start there. So this time I'm going to delete the first 21 of these images. So it's not always just one or two images that get deleted. Now I'm going to run through, and I'm watching this flower here. This is the main subject for my way of thinking about it. Now it's gone out of focus, but this leaf is in focus. Now the problem we're likely to encounter here is, see, we can, if I go to where this is in focus and keep going, oh no, hold on, I've got this wrong. Forget what I just said. Right, let me start again at the beginning. Right, the flowers are coming into focus. Now that leaf is in focus. What happens then? And now it's jumped to the back. There we go. So I certainly don't want, because of that jump, I don't want the stuff at the back. If I tried to stack that as well, I'd probably have a problem. And what I'd have is probably halos here, between here and, if the fence was in focus, around the edge of this. So anything where you've got things which are a long way apart, front to back, and they're both in focus, the one at the front is very likely to have a halo around it, and it may be quite a bad halo. So I'm going to go back. So I'd be quite happy stopping there as far as the flowers are concerned, but this leaf here, well, you might like to leave it out of focus because that gives a bit more of depth to it, I suppose, a clue that things are going out of focus, make it look a bit more natural, because stacks do look a bit unnatural sometimes. Or I could take it back a bit more, have that one in focus as well, but just not go that far, come back a bit. So I could cut it off at that point. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do, so for aesthetic reasons, oh no, that's going on to the back. No, that's okay. I'd probably be inclined to leave it like that and leave that out of focus. That's very much a personal preference type judgment. If I do leave it in focus, I might get a bit of a halo around there. I might not. It depends how far this leaf is from this flower. Anyway, I'm going to delete the rest of these. And again, you see, it's an experimental approach. Try it and see. I could try versions with that leaf there in focus and with it out of focus, see which one I preferred. So if I stack these now, I'll use both methods. That's one and the other one, and we can have a look. Now, is there going to be much difference? Let's have a look at that problem area. Well, that's not an issue now, except we don't have the flowers showing through, but do you see? That looks like a halo to me, I wonder. Let's look at the other version. Yeah. You see, this is version, the method C, which is the pyramid, and that's given us a halo there. And I'm looking at 100% there, but even at a more normal viewing size, let's see. Yeah, I can still see halo there. Method B, well, it's still got a bit of a halo, but it's less, much less. There we go, that's B. That's C. However, what do the flowers look like? Let's have a look. They look fairly clean around the edges, which is nice. A bit overexposed there, but we'll look at that in a minute. Now, does the C... Ooh, now, that was C and B, C and B, C. In fact, I'm seeing... I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but at a normal viewing, well, at 100% I think it was actually, rather than normal viewing size, I'm now at 200%, and I can definitely see a halo around there in the C version. In the B version, I can't. Now, we've got judgment calls here. At 100%, and I don't look at my images at 100%, I produce them 1300 pixels high, but I can still see that. And I tend to, in fact, I can see a certain fuzziness around the edge here as well, which doesn't appear in the B version. Now, I tend to, there's more of that halo, I tend to raise shadows a lot, because I'm not too keen on dark backgrounds. In fact, this is light enough that I'd probably be comfortable with it. But where these halos occur, if you then raise the shadows, it's going to make that halo look worse. So there would actually be benefit in this case, because I can see the halos even. Well, that's not normal viewing size. Normal viewing size are probably around 50% or a bit more. Well, that's 50%. And with C, you see, I think I can still see a halo there. I'd be using B in this case anyway. But what I might do is to see if it will let me, and again, it doesn't always let you do this, but let me retouch this from the C version. Yes, it is going to let me. And what I could do is, while avoiding the edges, I could paint inside here to get the best sharpness and detail, which is what you get with version C. Also, version C does better. Sometimes you'll find, we talked about halos around the edge that version C sometimes puts in, but version B sometimes has halos around on the inside where things overlap, and using version C for that also can help. You just have to be careful not to go somewhere where you're actually going to cause a problem on the outer edge, because in fact there, look here on the C version on the left, there's that halo again. Now there was something else I noticed as well, and it's let me go back to and run through the source images. We're now going to look over on the left here, and I'm going to look this area here. Just want to have a look. Yeah, you see there's a leaf that's moving around, so I move backwards and forwards. Now what you might need to do in that case, in fact, yes, look, here it is. We've got a problem there. So what I'm going to do is, on the left, I'm now going back, I'm going through the source images, and I'm going to go back to the retouching one, and that's where I've painted over the inside from the C version. But this time I'm going to go to one of the original versions, and I'm going to pick one where this is there. That looks fairly good there. But of course I want the leaf there to look like it's in focus. Oh, incidentally, there, let me just make this a bit smaller. Make this bit smaller. Come on, go smaller, thank you. Down here, do you see there's actually a halo here, that the leaf is in focus here, but it's out of focus there. Now it may be that if we go back and say we want to retouch from the C version, yes, I can now paint from that, and that then goes back to something preferable, and I might want to do the same thing here. Okay, but now I'm going to go back to an individual image, and I'm going to press. Right, we had a technical glitch there. The two applications are both using F9, and F9 in the application I'm using to record the screen stops the recording. Well, that's a trap that I didn't know about. So I'm now on the individual images on the left, and I'm going to see if I can find one. Yeah, I've got a problem here. I want to have a nice version of that leaf, but I want the one behind. I'll use that one. It's going to be out of focus. I'm looking at the one on the left, which is an individual image. See if I can make this bigger. Whoops, bigger. Yeah, let's have a look. possibly about the best I can do. I've got more of the leaf in focus. The flower petal is out of focus, but in the wider context I don't think that'll notice as much as the confusion that we had there before. So I've now done painting onto this stack, both from another stack and from an individual image. So what I'll do is save this now. So I'll save this. I'm going to save it as a TIFF file again. I'll change the name a bit. So that's B30 with smoothing 4, but I also used C4. I painted from method C with parameter 4, and I painted from an individual image, so I'll put +I in there. That gives me some indication of what I did to it, so I know afterwards. I also know that I used 21 frames and that it started what does that number tell me? I'm not quite sure. Right, let's save that. What I'm going to do now is go into Lightroom and synchronize that folder. So I can now, if I look at the one that I just did, this is the one that I just did, and I'm going to do some more things to it. There are a couple of things that I notice. One is that this looks rather, bright here. We can see the histogram. It's not actually overexposed, or at least according to the histogram it isn't, but it might do better with a longer tail up there, as I think we're going to find in a minute. This is going to be problematic. And this bit over here is out of focus but rather bright. So one of the things that I'm going to do is, I think for this one, I'll tone that down so that it's more in keeping with this bit up here and less obtrusive. The other thing is I could try auto on this and see what happens. Where are we? Sorry, I'm using a small, I can't see as much on the screen as usual, and my eyes are getting a bit puzzled as to what's going on. Oh yes, of course I need to close that one down. I could try auto toning it and see what that does. Oh yeah, there we go. No, I don't think so. If I reset, that goes back bright again. What I'll do is go backwards to there. That's it. And there's a bit here at the edge actually. I'm going to crop that off. This is compositional, just so the edge looks nicer to my eye. And it brings it in a bit on that side, and there are a couple of sort of bright bits there. I don't mind them being not visible as well. Top looks fine. One might want to bring the bottom up a bit to get the overall aspect ratio more pleasing. That's a very personal sort of thing. But what about this area here and possibly this one here? What I'll try, and there's something at the bottom there. I think I'll probably leave that. I might be tempted to try and do something about it, but I'll leave that for the moment. Right, what about this area, this bright area? Well, I'll try painting just that area. Doesn't want to be much. You see the hue has changed by bringing the highlights down that much. You can't do much to it. see, if I try taking the overall exposure of the image down, I'll just close that for the moment. I'm now working on the whole image rather than just that area. It doesn't necessarily, I don't know. Again, a matter of taste. It's maybe all looking a bit dark now, and this is the sort of thing that I tend to underexpose, at least to yeah, I suppose you'd call it underexpose. It's not actually underexposing the images, but I tend to expose mine so they've got a longer tail, which might make things like this slightly easier. I know when I tried this before I had trouble with this area. But there we go. I've done, excuse me, I've done a little bit to it. And if we have a look, where are we? It was this one, I think. Okay. I'm trying to highlight. Oh, that's because, bear with me. Oh, there it is. Right. That's what it looks like. Yeah, that's turning it on and off. I'm trying to get it to show us the area that I'm working on, which usually comes up in red, and I don't know why it's not. Show selected mask overlay. Oh, I don't know why that is. Right, okay, I did warn you that this was unscripted. If I say done, so what I've now got is something where it's been cropped a bit. I've taken that out or down because I thought it was a bit cluttering. This I'd be inclined to do something about, but I can't because the videos can't be bothered because the video's getting long. And anyway, there we are. That's the sort of thing I do, and I might now save this and put it out to Topaz, Sharpen, not Sharpen AI, Topaz Denoise AI, for a little bit of denoising and some sharpening, although it quite probably doesn't need it. So perhaps I wouldn't. Anyway, that's the sort of process that I use. You can see it's a bit experimental. Try it and see. There are complications. I don't know if some of these problems arise so much when you're dealing with subjects like insects, smaller subjects where perhaps you don't get these surfaces that you want in focus that are relatively a long distance apart relative to their size, which you do tend to get in botanical images. And that's it. Okay, so that's the video. That's all for now. Goodbye.